Hello, I'm Evely, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. The room was dimly lit by the faint glow of the moon. It cast long shadows across the floor and made the edges of the furniture look twisted, as if they were leaning in toward me. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee and old paper. I had been lying still for what felt like hours, though the exact time eluded me. The sheets felt unnaturally heavy, almost as if someone had placed a weight on top of them. A shiver ran through my spine, a chill creeping up my legs, but I couldn't move. My body wouldn't obey. Something was wrong. I could hear faint sounds, distant creaks, like the floorboards groaning under the weight of someone, or something, moving around the room. My heart began to race, and I tried to open my eyes, but they wouldn't budge. Panic set in, and I realized with growing horror that I couldn't move a single part of my body. I was trapped, but worse, there was something else in my body, using it, controlling it like a puppet. I was aware, awake, but trapped inside myself. A chill crept up my spine as I felt the movement. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, just a slight change in the way my body was positioned. Whoever or whatever was using me stretched my limbs. My fingers twitched unnaturally, flexing like claws, curling into a fist. The sound of my knuckles cracking echoed through the room, though I couldn't feel it. I wanted to scream, to shout, to do anything to stop it, but I was frozen, helpless. I could hear my own breath, shallow, slow, as if I were deeply asleep, but I knew I wasn't. I was wide awake, trapped in the confines of my own body, while an unknown entity took control. The air in the room grew colder, and a strange sense of foreboding washed over me, like the very walls were closing in. The silence was almost suffocating, punctuated only by the creaks and rustles of things shifting around. Then, as if it could sense my fear, the entity, or whatever it was, moved again. I felt my head shift, tilting toward the door, though I had no control over the movement. The person using my body seemed to be looking for something. I could feel the tension in my muscles, the deliberate way my arms rose and fell, as if I were no longer just a person, but an instrument in someone else's hands. I could feel my feet hitting the cold floor, and then my body was standing, though I didn't want it to. I tried to scream, tried to force my limbs to move, but nothing responded. The room spun slightly as I took a step toward the door. My heart thundered in my chest, but my body didn't flinch. The door creaked open with a faint whisper, the sound sending a wave of unease over me. The hallway outside was dark, save for the faint flicker of light coming from underneath the bathroom door. It was then that I noticed something truly horrifying. A reflection, no, a shadow, moved across the hallway in sync with the movements of my body. But it wasn't me. Not anymore. The figure in the shadow was wrong. It was taller, its posture unnaturally stiff, and its face, my face, was twisted into a grotesque expression of malice. My mouth hung open in a mockery of speech, but no sound came from my throat. I tried to scream, but my lips wouldn't move. My vocal cords wouldn't cooperate. I could feel the cold, clammy sweat running down the back of my neck as my body stepped forward, each movement deliberate and eerie. There was a sense of purpose to it. But what was it doing? Why was it walking like this? Where was it going? As the figure reached the bathroom door, I felt my heart skip a beat. I wanted to look away, to close my eyes and pretend I hadn't seen it, but the darkness of the hallway seemed to be pulling me in. My body, no, the intruder, slowly reached out and grasped the door handle. The cold metal seemed to burn against my palm, and I could feel the dampness of sweat clinging to my skin. A sharp gasp echoed in the silence as the door creaked open. Inside, the bathroom was empty, but it felt wrong. The air inside was thick, dense, like it was holding something back. I couldn't place it, but there was a presence in that room, lingering just out of sight. I could feel the tension building, and I had the distinct sensation that something was watching me, no, watching us. The figure in my body moved forward, and as it did, I felt an almost imperceptible tug, something pulling me deeper into the darkness. I tried to scream, to call for help, but all that escaped my lips was a raspy, breathless sound, like an exhalation of air from somewhere deep within me. My throat was dry, but the air was thick and oppressive, stifling the very breath from my lungs. I could feel the floor beneath my feet shifting, warping, as if the ground itself was beginning to buckle under the weight of the moment. I couldn't see what was in the bathroom, but I could sense something in the shadows. Something that didn't belong. It was lurking, just out of sight, waiting for the moment when the body it inhabited would slip closer to the edge of the abyss. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A surge of cold, sharp as ice, swept through the room, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. My own face stared back at me, but it was no longer just an ordinary reflection. The figure was twisted, its expression contorted in agony, like it was being pulled from within. My body shuddered, a violent jolt running through it. The eyes in the reflection, my eyes, began to bleed black, the liquid spilling down my cheeks in thick, viscous streams. I wanted to look away, to turn my head, but I couldn't. I wanted to scream, but my body wouldn't let me. Suddenly, the figure in the reflection blinked, and it wasn't me anymore. The eyes that stared back were dark, hollow, like the pits of some ancient, forsaken creature. The mouth curled into a grin, wide and malicious, revealing teeth that were sharp and uneven. It was grinning at me, and I knew that whatever was controlling my body had finally found what it was looking for. It was waiting for me to break, waiting for me to lose control. I could feel my chest tightening as the entity stepped forward. The presence in the room grew more oppressive, more suffocating. It was closing in, wrapping its invisible fingers around my neck, pulling me deeper into the dark. The reflection in the mirror seemed to stretch, distorting, the grin growing wider as it reached out to me, a twisted version of my own hand extending from the glass. And in that moment, I realized, it wasn't just controlling my body, it was becoming me. The mirror cracked, splitting into shards, each piece reflecting a different version of me. Distorted, warped, twisted beyond recognition. But in each reflection, the same thing was clear. I wasn't alone anymore. The entity was me, and I was trapped inside my own skin. I woke with a jolt, gasping for breath. My body shot up from the bed, heart pounding, chest heaving. The room around me was quiet, too quiet. The moonlight filtered in through the curtains, casting eerie shadows on the walls, but everything felt off. My mind was racing, spinning with fragmented images of what had just happened. I had felt it, whatever it was, inside me, taking control, distorting everything, turning me into something else. I looked around the room, blinking rapidly. The walls seemed closer than usual, the corners darker. My breath was still shaky, the remnants of panic clinging to my ribs. My hands gripped the sheets, the fabric twisting between my fingers. I had to calm down, had to make sense of what had just occurred. It was a nightmare, I told myself. That's all it was. A dream. But the lingering sense of wrongness wouldn't let go. I glanced at the bed, where I had just been lying, and my stomach turned. There, under the blanket, was me. Or at least it looked like me. But there was something unsettling about the way I was sleeping, like my form had been drained of life. I lay motionless, too still, my face slack, mouth slightly open. It was as if someone had simply placed my body on the bed and left it there, forgotten. That wasn't right. I wasn't asleep, I had just woken up. I'd been awake all along, trapped inside myself. Panic surged again, a wave of cold dread that crawled down my spine. I knew something was terribly wrong, but I couldn't understand why. How was it that I was awake, yet my body still remained behind? Unconscious? I turned toward the window, hoping for some clarity, some sign that everything was normal. But the world outside seemed to be in chaos. The moon hanging too low in the sky, casting strange, unearthly shadows that flickered and moved with an unnatural life of their own. The trees outside were bent, their branches twisting like skeletal hands, stretching toward me, beckoning me to come closer. I stumbled toward the window, my feet unsteady, my mind in a haze. The world outside felt as if it were slipping away, distorted, blurred. I needed to get out. I needed to wake up. But before I could reach the window, I froze. A sound, soft but unmistakable, came from behind me. A faint creak of the floorboards, just loud enough to make my blood run cold. Someone or something was in the room with me. I spun around, my heart in my throat, but there was no one there. Nothing, except for the eerie silence that seemed to fill the room, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Then I heard it again, the softest of whispers. A voice, but not my own. "I see you." The words were barely audible, but they cut through the air like a knife. They came from the direction of my own body, still lying motionless on the bed, as if nothing had changed. The voice was familiar. It was mine, yet not mine. It was distorted, twisted in a way that made my skin crawl. It was as if someone had taken my voice and shattered it, bending it to their will. "Wake up!" I took a step back, trembling. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, my eyes locked on the figure lying in bed. My body. It was alive, but it wasn't mine anymore. I could feel it, it could feel me. The figure in the bed shifted. Just slightly at first, but enough to send a jolt of terror through me. The arms, once limp and lifeless, began to twitch. The fingers flexed, slowly at first, as if testing the air. Then the head turned. My head. The same face, the same eyes, staring at me, but there was something wrong. The eyes were empty, black pits like the deep void of an abyss, and they locked onto mine with a malevolent hunger. The body sat up, slowly, unnaturally, as if being guided by strings pulled from an unseen hand. My hands, no, its hands pressed against the bed, pushing against the weight of the blankets. The movement was jerky, disjointed, as if it were fighting against some invisible force, but it was deliberate, calculated. The body was waking up. It was waking up. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in shallow gasps, but my legs were still paralyzed, locked in place. I couldn't move, couldn't escape. I watched in horror as the figure slowly, steadily turned its head toward me. The grin that stretched across its face was wide, too wide, stretching from ear to ear, revealing teeth that were too sharp, too jagged to be human. The mouth parted and that same distorted voice spoke again. "You're not getting away." I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything. But all I could do was watch as the figure, my body, rose from the bed, its movements unnatural and jerky like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. The fingers curled, claws now, the nails too long, too sharp. And the eyes, those black eyes never left me. They followed me, watched me, as if waiting for me to make a move. But I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. The room seemed to grow colder, the temperature dropping rapidly, and I could see my breath, thick and misty, in the air. The shadows on the walls twisted, stretching and elongating, reaching toward me like tendrils of darkness. It was coming closer. I tried to speak, tried to shout, but no words came. My throat was dry, constricted, as if something had gripped it from the inside. The figure was now standing in front of me, looming over me, its presence suffocating, the air thick with malevolence. The grin on its face widened, stretching further until it seemed to split its face in two. "Don't you remember?" the voice whispered, distorted and garbled, as if something was interfering with its very existence. "You invited me in." I blinked, confusion flooding my mind. What are you talking about?" I forced the words out, though they sounded weak, desperate. The figure leaned down, its breath cold against my ear. "I've always been here. I've always been inside you. You just never noticed." Suddenly, the room felt even colder. The shadows deepened, curling around me like tendrils, closing in. I tried to move, tried to break free, but my body refused to respond. I was trapped. Trapped with it. The thing that had taken over my body. The thing that had become me. I felt its fingers brush against my skin, cold and sharp like ice. Its grip tightened around my throat, lifting me off the ground, and I gasped for air, my vision blurring. The walls seemed to close in on me, the darkness growing thicker, more suffocating with every passing second. "You can't escape," it whispered. "I've already won." And then everything went dark. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt my body relax. My control returned, but it was too late. The shadow inside me had already taken over, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The last thing I heard before the darkness consumed me was a soft, chilling laugh. And then, silence. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.